right. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of both the Poetry of Predicament podcast, and also this is the, excuse me, the final installment, the final Zoom meetings of a 13-month online training seminar series called Islands of Sanity in a Mad World. And that's been produced and offered by our little organization here, the Living Resilience. And of course, the in parallel, offered up on the YouTube channel, The Poetry of Predicament. And this is indeed the last Saturday in the last month of this year-long program. It's actually been 13 months here in September of 2025, which means we started before the Trump presidency kicked into real life action in January of this year. And I think it's pretty safe to say that we have a universal experience in this country of massive changes that America was, except for a very small number of people who are actually making these changes happen, most of America did not see any of this coming. And you were just describing, Richard, your experience of how Americans are really like deer in the headlights, and just clueless, and continue to be more and more so as a very intentional effect of the long refined methodology to control the narrative in the USA in such a way as to disempower people who are not a part of the special privileged class, the government and broligarch and corporatist class. And so here we are in a lesser level of this culture. And in Islands of Sanity in a Mad World, what we've been looking at is through a number of different lenses, from a number of different perspectives, what are the effects on our well-being to be in a self-terminating culture, which is our what kind of advanced way of saying not just that we're collapse aware around here, not just that we're collapse acceptant around here, but every indicator for quite some time for those who pursue this kind of information and this kind of experience, it's fairly evident that we are a self-terminating culture. And what has been rather surprising to me, even though I've been anticipating this self-termination since I was a teenager back in the 70s, I didn't expect it to come on this quickly, nor did I expect it to come on with the cruelty and intensity and rapidity of the Project 2025 Christo-fascist and broligarch fascist intentions driving it. And so here we are. And Richard, thank you for joining me. I don't know if we'll have other folks joining us in this first section or in the second section of today. But what I'd like to do with you is to check in at as deep a level as is appropriate for each of us to share with each other and with the folks who will be watching this recording. And we invite you, of course, folks who are watching, to participate, not just watch, not just listen to whatever Richard or I might share in our check-ins with our sharing, but really stop the video from time to time and take the time to answer these questions that we're going to be exploring, these topics that we're going to be exploring. If you if you don't already do some journaling in your life, you may want to take up that habit. I have found it to be essential since writing my one and only book in this world, The Impossible Conversation, which is really more or less about this self-terminating culture, hence the name, The Impossible Conversation. So I would recommend, again, if you don't already, to consider jotting down some notes in as you listen to this and as you ponder some of the questions, some of the prompts. And we will also be talking about the next iteration. Yes, this is the closing up of the completion of this year-long program. We've learned a lot. I've learned a lot about how to put together this kind of program in a far more versatile, accessible, uh, lighter scale program, meaning not as much content, not as frequent, and not having a library, a massive library that has accumulated over this year to be able to give people a chance to do deep dives when they need to or want to, but they will not have any more confusion or clutter in their space of the too much content all the time.
Hmm.
It's our intention to have this be a very much a winnowed down, um, highly refined
Hmm.
course offering in the next iteration. But before we get to all that, which we'll talk about more in the second session, this is a time now for checking in. I've introduced what this series is about, that this is the a culmination or the completion time for that longer program, that we've experienced what I believe is the most significant threshold in human history, and more importantly, more realistically, more palpably in U.S. history. This is the largest and most critical threshold we have ever crossed as a nation. And again, I would assert for the world as well. So not to not to overstate it, or it does, we don't need hyperbole here. Um, so in light of that, Richard, I'd like to post into the chat, and I'll be, of course, putting this on the screen for folks in the, who are watching the recording. I'd like to just remind us all of the types of health that have been central lenses through which we've viewed this past year, the events of this year. And so from time to time, we'll speak about mental health, we'll talk about physical health, we'll talk about relational health, we'll talk about spiritual health. So none of those, we didn't talk about any of those every time. Um, but we did touch on one or another of them every time. And I'm putting in the chat right now. Richard, I don't know if you'd be willing to go to check in first, and if not, that's not a problem. I'm happy to do so. And what I'm particularly wanting us to look at is here's the list at the top of mental health, physical health, relational health, and spiritual health.
Hmm.
And then down at the bottom of that list, I've got the check-ins, the questions, the prompts that you might want to use if you're journaling on the other end of this recording. How would you assess your own health in each aspect of life, each aspect of mental, physical, relational, and spiritual? And how would you compare these self-assessments to 1 year ago?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Huh.
So
Well, I can
this
go
will be
first. I
a
mean,
more personal level check-in, and feel free to speak in terms of whichever of those aspects of being a person that is most alive for you. And feel free to take it in any direction you'd like, because I don't know that it's possible to have an irrelevant tangent here. You know, this is about as core as it gets.
Sure.
So whatever's alive for you, I would love to hear it. And would you like to check in, Richard, or would you like me to lead it out?
I can do it. That's fine. I can start. Uh, hmm. Well, yeah, I mean, my physical health seems pretty stable at this point. And I'd say my spiritual health is doing all right and pretty stable too. Relational health is getting a little more problematic because things with my partner, Darlene, are getting more difficult. Mainly because she's dealing with this, pretty bad disability, and she's given up on getting any real substantial help. So she's not really open to getting therapy or, mental or physical therapy at this point. So that's having, I would say that's having a negative impact on our relationship, and also, unfortunately, it's having a negative impact on my view of her because, personal growth and healing work is really important to me, and it doesn't really fit with me. I don't know how to say this. It's not, it doesn't fit with my way of looking at life and my preferred way of being in the world. It just doesn't fit
Yeah.
to be with around somebody all the time who doesn't want to do those things. So it's getting more challenging. I'll put it that way. I even started I started individual therapy again in the last couple of weeks just to have somebody to talk over these issues with. And I asked for a man in particular because I wanted a male perspective. I've worked with a lot of women therapists, a lot of female healers, but not that many men. So I just wanted to try a male therapist, which is going all right. Pretty, he has some good ideas and insights. So anyway, so my mental health is not real great at the moment. And again, I have to kind of differentiate between, and we've talked about this a lot, the differentiation between our own personal lives and what's going on in the larger world around us. And on a lot of levels, my own personal life is still okay. I mean, I'm doing all right. I have money. I have enough to, live on. I have a nice house, got a nice yard, plants, vegetables, lots of things are fine. But the larger picture is just horrendous. And so, I don't know. I would say compared to a year ago, my mental health is slightly more precarious and a little more negative. I mean, my attitudes have become more negative about the United States and what we're doing in this country and what's happening here. So, all these things that are going on are obviously affecting all of us, but it particularly affects my emotional and attitudinal health, I would say. Uh, my attitudes are getting more jaded, maybe, or hardened. Darker. It's hard to know what the right word is. Just more negative in general. I mean, so many awful things are happening, and there's so little effective resistance to this takeover that it's very discouraging. So I'd say that's the theme for me over the past year is being discouraged, and especially since Trump came back into office, and they're wiping out all these environmental programs and wiping out aid programs and wiping out consumer protection programs. It's like one good thing after another is being wiped out or, totally watered down or whatever, slaughtered. It's pretty bad. Um, so I hmm, it's still hard, even after all this time, Trump's been around for 10 years. We've watched this process unfolding in the United States for the last decade or more. And it's still hard for me to believe that we're really at such a horrible place. I mean, that we're really here and it's getting worse at a exponential rate. It's like it's very hard to really accept that or really get it even. I mean, to fully get it, but it's scary. I mean, I it's very frightening stuff. It's really creepy.
Mhm.
And I keep thinking back to like some of these really horrendous um genocides of the past. Of course, there's what the Nazis did with the Jews and the Gypsies and the communists and socialists and anybody they deemed undesirable. I mean, that was probably the biggest example, but there's been a lot of other ones. I mean, Stalin killed something like 20 million people in Russia, and in Cambodia, was it Pol Pot?
Mhm.
I mean, that communist takeover slaughtered a huge number of people. And then, there was the Rwandan genocide where these two differing factions or tribal entities, went at it with each other, and I think over 1 million people were killed, I think. It's like, in the United States, we have this really delusional idea that we're somehow above all that and it can't happen here. I think it could. I
Mhm.
think it could. And it's really scary. And of course, this Charlie Kirk thing recently really ramped it all up. So, there's a lot of people now calling for civil war and they want to go out and murder liberals and libtards and progressives and all these people they think are so horrible. Um, it's really getting out of control here. That's what's scary. I mean, everything seems to be spiraling out of control. That includes Trump. He's definitely spiraling out of control.
Yeah.
So, I mean, my personal life is still somewhat okay, but I'm not a happy camper. I do not enjoy this life that we're stuck in right now, and I do not enjoy this societal reality we're stuck in. It's very unpleasant, to say the least. Dangerous, unpleasant and dangerous. So that's my check-in.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to check in just a moment, but I'm just being with letting it kind of ripple through what you've been sharing, and I so appreciate your ability to, I mean, it must be natural to you because you show this in your writing on Medium and elsewhere, where you're able to pull a thread from a very personal place in yourself, and then to be able to draw it out and
Hmm.
contextualize it out in the at a greater scale. And you do that in every time you check in, and this is a kind of a significant threshold that we're at, and you have I'm very thankful for your ability to do that. It's a great skill, and it's an appropriate way to start out this completion process, this checking in order to really complete and check out of this
Hmm.
particular branch of
Yeah.
this work. And so, yeah, I'm just feeling that and appreciating that. It is one of the basic skills of this inner work of collapse that we do here in Living Resilience. There's some basic skills, probably starts, in my experience, with our ability to generate a sense of coherence, coherence in our own system. Coherence meaning there's a resonance, there's a stillness and a resonance in our center that we can really occupy the center of who we are. It's could be the place that, common sense comes from when we're, living daily life in a regular way. If we're relaxed and if we're centered in relationship with the world around us and the people around us, there's a coherence that can show up that is nearly at the opposite end of the spectrum from what we now call normal in our culture. You and I joke every time we get together about the fire hose to the face of too much content, too much everything all the time. And that is obviously deliberate, a way to disempower us at scale so that the kinds of destruction that we're seeing and manipulation that we're seeing can actually be effortlessly installed. And so this has not been just an accident that we stumbled into from January of this year. This is a very long and deliberate creation of the Heritage Foundation, the evangelicals, and the Christo-fascist side of the power groups behind Trump. But it's also been longer than that. They've been
Yeah.
at this for 40, close to 50 years,
Yep.
but it's been longer than that. And I would say that when it really went to scale was sometime around the beginning of Edward Bernays' career in public relations. And of course, the name of one of his most famous books is Propaganda. He literally wrote the book on propaganda, and that book was on Goebbels' desk during the Third Reich. And
Yeah.
Bernays came to be one of the most instrumental pioneers of how to influence an entire nation by controlling the narrative. So enough of that. I just wanted to speak a little bit of presencing just a little bit of what we're up against, what the kind of things that you're describing being at the effect of to some degree. And certainly I'm going to share that when I'm checking in. So, checking in myself to complete this Islands of Sanity in a Mad World course in our time together in this particular evolutionary step of the inner work of collapse. So I'll just start with a little list to just cue myself. And for my own mental health, I feel really blessed that I've had a long lead in time, long time leading up to now and to these past, roughly decade or so when it's intensified by getting a very strong message when I was a teenager that this would be a self-terminating culture. That wasn't the word, that's not the term that was used, but it was made very clear that there was nothing salvageable and there was no way to turn around the tide of this culture terminating itself and along with it much of life on earth. Of course, I didn't know exactly when it would happen, but I had some very vivid mentoring and images of what would be kind of the steps that we might go through. None of those steps that I heard about early on included this kind of fascist takeover and the cruelty and the really deeply evil destruction that seems to be pervasive now. So I can say that I've done a lot, as I know you have, Richard. I've done a lot of process work in my time to take care of my own brands of pathology growing up as a very angry young man, and a lot of work to do to be able to be around people and not be a burden to them, not be offensive with my intensity and my armoredness and so on and so on. And what I can say is that saved my life to do that level of work and to be that raw volitionally in a conscious circle, to have space held in beautiful fashion, year after year, and it has become part of my backbone that I rely on daily. So I think you'll recall last time we met a few days ago, uh, that I checked in that I'm stretched to the edge of my capacity these days. And it wasn't because of the massive, um, energetically violent suppression of unpleasant to the leader communication. You know, they've made it very, very clear. If you say things that the leader or the administration doesn't like, then really we've crossed the threshold. We will now be going to those concentration camps that were originally set up just months ago for the immigrants. And so anyone who's a Democrat, who's a liberal, who's a libtard, with the list goes on, that we are now under scrutiny 24/7 with the most intensive surveillance in the history of mankind to monitor what we're saying, even down to what we're thinking, and that everything is in place to put us into work camps, concentration camps, jail, or worse. And this is a strain on my mental health. I am straining to hold all that. But it's interesting, that little list that I just made, that little description of recent events, that isn't even what's stretching me right now. What's stretching me is during that exact week when we've had this incredible tsunami of suppression of free speech and free thought, and we're supposed to bend the knee and we're supposed to worship this Charlie Kirk person who's been assassinated. That's not what's stretching me to the edge of my capacity. During this time, with all those very disturbing events, there have also been a number of lynchings. And for a number of reasons, which I won't go into, I'm just going to slow it down now because I've been in more describing mode than I am sharing mode. So I'm just going to slow it down for a second because that's what I had to do when I heard about these lynchings. And they've gone from two originally about a week ago to at least five that I'm aware of by now. And I can say that from the earliest time that I heard of what a lynching was, which is, I was younger than 10. I'm 7 or 8, maybe. And my mom did her best to describe to me what does a lynching mean? And why would people do that? From that moment on, I didn't know how to file it away in my experience. Like, how do I make sense of this? How do I put it in a way that this is a part of human beings? And it barely makes the news cycle now. And so there's a question that I've had since I was a little boy is now come around to being, who have we become? Who have we become? And that is part of my mental health strain right now. I think I also shared a couple days ago that I don't like people much right now. I don't like Americans much right now. And of course I'm generalizing. Of course there are people I love and appreciate appreciate and am deeply related with. And I don't like people much right now. It's hard. And I have waves of rage and fear and so on from time to time as I look to the people who are putting all these things in place and have barely begun. I know that this is, as Francis Weller likes to call it, the long dark. So that's enough of an overview of mental health and what are some of the primary strains and then secondary strains on mental health for me right now. Physical health, basically I'm pretty well, and I have a uh, minimal, minimal direct, real concerns in my body right now. But what I can say is that given the last few months and the complete destruction of much of the safety net that we've come to call normal in the USA, like healthcare, like Medicare, like Medicaid, I've lost my Medicaid, all of it. It's gone. And and so that means, other than Medicare, which I can resume, I'm fully employed right now, so that disengages me from day-to-day relationship with it. The predatory nature, excuse me, of our healthcare system is another piece that's stretching me. I'm just astounded at what we have normalized, that this is the way it's now going to be. And the answer keeps looking like whether you're homeless, you have mental health issues, you're of a certain age, you're of a certain nationality or skin color, you're of a certain, if you're trans, if you're, depending on the marginal population du jour, we could all end up sitting next to one another in work camps or concentration camps, call them what you will. And it is clear to me that this is another way that people who aren't part of the ultra wealthy and ultra powerful will be just discarded as needed. And that's what those facilities are for. And now healthcare or lack of access to healthcare is another way that a person could qualify to being discarded. Relational health, I am so deeply appreciative of the circles I get to sit in with you, Richard, in many of them. Got a few starting up and carrying on here where I live in Southern Oregon. Some people I'm still in circle with in different places around the world. And for those relationships, I am deeply, deeply grateful. They are sustaining, nourishing component in my life. And yeah, a bit difficult to imagine what it would be like without them. Other relationships, I've watched the complete withdrawal of my sister from wanting to be related with me at all, contact me as far as I know for the rest of my life. I won't go into the details now, but that's been something we've talked about from time to time in our circles, and that's been very, very painful to me. And it's the start of a number of things I could share about cancel culture and how it has nothing to do with if a person's on the right or the left. We're all subject to it. And it seems like the default way to handle issues in our world is just to eliminate it, to cancel it, to cancel that person. I'll never talk to you again. Done. And for me, that is also just I have a lot of grief about that, substantial amount of fear about that, and a substantial amount of anger about that. Just the amount of tragedy of my dating life in the past 2 years has been bizarre. Three of the five people I have tried dating uh, have have ended our dating time in with complete silence, canceling. So I could go on a bit more, but I think you get the idea. And so relational health is a mixed bag, um, both extraordinarily nourishing and deeply discouraging. And spiritual health, this is truly the lifesaver for me. Um, if I had but one thing that I could bring with me in the days to come, it would be this. Um, Somehow over my life, I've been able to gain what I call an access. It could be called a gate as well, a gate that I can open at will inside myself, that swing open that gate and I can open myself to an experience of something that the closest I've come to describing it is that it seems like in many of the wisdom traditions, people who have spent their whole lives in monasteries or in philosophical studies or in caves on a mountain, they've done that isolation to get just a few drops of, few tastes of the oneness, the love, the immensity, the ineffable that is behind it all. It all of this human drama, all of our life on earth and beyond, and infusing far beyond anything we've imagined. And so to have this access to at some small level is is the kind of thing that pulls me through even when I've was describing earlier, getting to the limit of what I can hold in terms of mental health, in terms of being able to sense make in this crazy world. So I would say that my spiritual health will continue to be at the core of my learning and growing and expanding edge till the day I move on, spiritually and physically. And it is what has helped me survive. Yeah. So I'll stop there. I know it's been a long check-in, but it's really okay, since we're the two voices here. And I'm wondering if after you have now checked in and I've checked in, Richard, is anything else emerging for you that you'd like to speak about?
Well, I don't know if this is an appropriate forum, but when you're talking, I was found myself wondering, exactly what is happening with Medicaid and Medicare. And you said you lost your Medicaid, so I'm curious why. Why would you lose it?
Yeah. Well, there are um, every state is different.
Yeah.
And every state is going through changes that they can barely keep up to be able to then articulate to the folks like myself who are on the consuming end. Um, Much of it has to do with uh, having a job above, basically above minimum wage,
Oh, okay, right.
starts to either chip away at or
Oh,
completely eliminate my access to
oh, yeah,
these
yeah. Okay.
programs. So, what I can tell you is that in this Southern Oregon town where I live, I am making what's considered a decent starting wage, and it is below a living wage here
Yeah,
in this town, so that I'm spending substantially more than 50% of that income for my rent alone.
really? Holy crap.
And that has been so for a long time.
Yikes.
That's
That's,
that's not just new to this year. That has been this area. And I'm afraid to break it to everybody who might be watching. And unless you're in the same situation, then it won't be any surprise at all
yeah.
that the vast majority of this country is living in very similar financial straits. We are not being paid living wages in this country.
No,
We're still at a $7 and I don't know, 50 cents or something
that's the national minimum wage. It's
minimum
ridiculous.
wage.
Crazy. I
That's
know.
a whole nother conversation for perhaps next hour. There's some elements of that that I think are really important to look at. What will the inner work of collapse be in the coming months, not to mention years?
Yeah.
So that's a big one, and hopefully that's enough response. Did you have another question or thought?
No, no. No, that's pretty shocking though that you have to spend almost 50% of your income on just rent. I mean, because, I remember when I was younger, the so-called experts would say, well, you really shouldn't be spending more than a quarter of your income on rent. And then, rents kept going up and wages didn't really follow suit as much. And then, by a little while ago, they were up to like 30 or 35%. It's like, oh, you shouldn't be spending more than a third of your income on rent. But you said almost a half. I mean, that's outrageous.
More than a half.
More than a half. Holy crap. Jesus. That's unbelievable.
Yeah,
That's pretty crazy.
yeah.
Okay. Hmm.
So we're kind of on the downhill side of this first session of two today. And it is meant to be the the kind of personal check-in, which exactly what we've just done. And hopefully the folks watching the recording have, taken the prompts and paused the video for a few minutes to do your own version. I'd invite us to now look for a few moments on one last piece of a check-in, little bit more specific. I've been exploring for months now, since Elon Musk in his Doge days of wantonly destroying agency after agency here in our government. In a long interview that I saw of him in that time, he's saying, you know, there's really a bug in the human body, in the human life, in the human system, and that's empathy. It's not something that is, above a certain level. It's just not useful. It's just strange and not positive. So I'm not remembering the exact words, but it was along those lines. And I'm curious if you, Richard, have anything to share in your experience of who have Americans become in terms of our ability to have empathy for one another, for other human beings. So I know you're a keen observer of the human condition that shows up in your writings every time you post. I'm curious if you have anything to share from your perspective about who we've become in terms of our relatedness with each other at
Oh
the
yeah,
larger scale.
you bet. This is actually, I was thinking of bringing up the theme we haven't touched on in a while because I think it's very relevant. And it's especially relevant to this empathy issue, and that is the theme of Wetiko,
Mhm.
or the mind virus. You can describe it different ways, but I think a lot of what's going on can be attributed to the rapid spread of this epidemic of Wetiko. And this mind virus is like really taking over our culture, It's I mean, it's kind of embodied. It's embodied in Trump and the Project 2025 people, and a lot of his horrible agency heads who are doing their best to undermine or destroy the agencies they're supposed to lead, et cetera, et cetera. But I mean, I mean, it seems to me the kind of the essence of this mind virus is that it kind of embroils people. It sucks people into this very separative, divisive, fear-based, anger-based mindset. And of course, if you're angry and paranoid and fearful, then you're not going to have a lot of empathy, for other people. You're going to see them as the enemy, right?
Mhm.
I mean, there's a lot. It sort of like turns almost everybody into the enemy. You got your little in group, and those are the people you feel okay with, and you agree with their beliefs, and kind of that's your side. That's the side you're on. But everybody else, which is the majority of people, they're not part of your in group. They're the enemy. Somehow, they're to be feared. They're to be despised. They're to be controlled. They're to be not they're to be not acknowledged as human, And that touches into that book you've been reading, The Inhumans, which I haven't even dared pick up yet, but I don't even want to. But I know what's in it. I have a real good idea what's in it, and it's like, one sick bunch of crap after another. So anyway, yeah, it seems like this mind virus is just running rampant, in our society, and all this bullshit about empathy being a bad thing is part of it. I mean, it's really clearly an aspect of this horrible mind virus. That's my take on it.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm of course, right there with you on all of that, and I really appreciate you bringing in the dehumanization as a part of what you're seeing. And yeah, it is a direct fit with that awful book, Unhumans.
Yep.
Uh, but as I've said in other podcast episodes, for anybody watching the recording, if you have the capacity for it, I would recommend very much reading that book because it really goes right to the core of this is really happening. This is really happening in terms of every scale of violence and dehumanization and destruction that one can imagine. There's nothing off the table. So we're going to talk more about the larger scale, the societal level, the national level, and even the global level of this inner work of collapse. But it really is that kind of insidious shadow motivation inside ourselves that it's interesting how it's very, very thinly veiled. How the Heritage Foundation folks, the Christo-fascists, the Broligarchs, all of them have absolutely nothing good to say about us coming to terms with any amount of truth telling about the foundation of this nation and so many nations around the world, and really of the market-driven system that is taking us down. And that is colonization, that is genocide, that is slavery, that is the subjugation and the subsequent dehumanization of people. And, you know, just one way, I'll just perhaps lighten us up just a wee bit, broaden it back out just a little bit so we can take a break, take a few breaths, come back and perhaps dive in from a different direction. Um, it is no surprise if you look at our world through this lens of dehumanization being an instrumental part of control, an instrumental part of every decolonization, excuse me, every colonization um, regimen that has ever occurred on the planet, that we have installed that process of dehumanization and othering and shadow driven control in less than 6 months' time. We have made it all very much a part of everyday life. We have normalized each of those pieces as a part of everyday life in less than a year. Just staggering. So, um, I think it would be a good time for us to wrap up this particular session. Richard, again, I just so appreciate your articulation, your sharing, and this chance to have my own sharing be heard and held as you do so well. What I'd also like to do is bring an upturn in our next session, which will just be after our break time coming soon. I'd like to remind us of each of us having a certain amount of access to that ineffable, that beauty, that
Yeah.
sacred, that uh, unspeakable beauty of deep relatedness that we actually have access to. It's just in that fire hose to the face 24/7 of this insanity. It can be easy to forget.
Yep, that's a good point.
Yeah. So that's what's coming. And so it'll be the same link when we come back to visit with each other for the second session.
Right.
And Richard, would you be interested in meeting up at quarter past the hour, or would you like to have the entire half hour?
Oh, well, um, some people might want to show up at the designated time. That's my only concern. I
That's
don't know
true.
what,
That's very true.
so I don't know.
No, I had forgotten completely about that. Thank you.
Yeah, so I don't know. Maybe nobody else will come. Maybe they will. I have no idea. But you know, I'm open to meeting earlier. But what do you think?
No, I appreciate your point, and I think it would be very wise to just keep it at that time. Thank you.
All right, that's fine with me. I'll see you then at 10:30. Good.
All right, brother.
Yep. Bye. See you then.